So, as you might know, there is a special committee of advisors to advise our chairperson of the party, and then there's a bunch of special assistants like us. You see some young faces who are gathered here today. It's actually part of the party policy to increase engagement on different levels, and for our stakeholders and different development partners to also get to know us. So maybe when we work together in the future, maybe we can have a better understanding of ourselves. So I'll make it short for now. The title of the seminar is pretty much self-explanatory. Still, I'm going to read that out. From crisis to stability, democracy is the foundation of economic growth. So I would like to welcome all the guests and our guest speakers today will be Mr. Rashid Al-Ditovi, Dhaka University professor at Dhaka University. We have Mashru Riyaz, Chairman, Policy Exchange, and we have Mohammad Hassan Khan Babu, President BGMA, and possibly Mr. Hamid, Editor Boni Barta. I really apologize if I got anyone's name incorrectly or the title, because it's difficult for me to read the handwriting. Lastly, I would like to thank representatives from the Australian High Commission, Embassy of Japan, Iran, China, Palestine, Germany, Switzerland, and British High Commission to have answered to our invitation today and participating in this roundtable seminar where we hope to learn from each other a lot more. At this point, I would like to introduce the team that was basically formed by our acting chairman a few months back, and he gave us some special objectives, is to engage with different stakeholders, different foreign nationals living in Bangladesh, potential investors and current investors in the country. Because as you know, we are transitioning through a difficult period of time headed towards democracy. So from our team, we have the senior most member, Barrister Nasiruddin Oshim. He is also the International Affairs Secretary of BNP Central Committee. We have Barrister Kaiser Kamal. He is a Law Affairs Secretary of BNP Central Committee. We have Barrister Mir Helaluddin. He's an organizing secretary from Chittagong Division. We have Mahdi Amin. He's obviously, as you all might know, he's advisor to our acting chairman, Mr. Tariq Rahman. We have Mr. Tabit Awal, member of Executive Committee BNP, plus he has a lot of other titles. He's currently the president of Bangladesh Football Federation and so on. And then you have me, Engineer Ishraq Hussain. I'm a special assistant to the chairperson's Foreign Affairs Advisory Committee. Then we have Advocate Farzana Sharmin Putul, special assistant to the chairperson's Foreign Affairs Advisory Committee. And we have Israfil Khosru, special assistant to the chairperson's Foreign Affairs Advisory Committee. At this point, I would like to invite Mr. Mahdi Amin to come give his keynote speech. Thank you.
Good morning, friends from the international community. Thanks for your attendance today. We appreciate your presence. If you see, last year, during this time, July, we had a mass uprising where we saw a united Bangladesh in one side and the stakeholders of the authoritarian regime in another side. People from all classes, professions, ideologies, political or non-political stakeholders all came together to build a Bangladesh where we rise from the destruction of democracy and form a democratic government, and we get rid of an authoritarian regime who were clinging to power, whose power stemmed not from the people, but from the state apparatus, police, law enforcement agencies, judiciary, bureaucracy, and election commission. All of those were totally politicized. So the aspiration of July was to build a Bangladesh where the country will be run by true representatives, a government that truly works for the people, and where we see public mandate in policies, in politics, where we see accountability, where there will be transparency to ensure fairness, equality, justice, and good governance. BNP understands this and values it as the largest political party that if we want to take the country forward, we have to reform how the country had been run. We have to reform how the politics was conducted. We have to reform how the policies were formulated. If we see the history of Bangladesh, multi-party democracy, export of manpower and garment industries, all these were taken, all these are brought forward in BNP governments. The very fundamental essence of caretaker government, how the country should be formulated through youth empowerment for different ministries for the youth and for women's empowerment through different ministries for the women and children. All these were done in previous BNP governments under President Ziaur Rahman and Prime Minister Begum Khaleda Zia. With that legacy of reforms, in 2016, our chairperson, Begum Khaleda Zia, announced Vision 2030 that almost a decade ago totally and wholeheartedly embraced the reform policies. In 2023, our acting chairman, Mr. Tareq Rahman, announced 31-point charter based on a common consensus of all pro-democracy stakeholders. We take a pride that most of the discussions that surround reform policies, whether it's bicameral legislature, whether it's term of the Prime Minister, the checks and balances, the power distribution between the Prime Minister, President, the executive, judiciary, all these were detailed, chalked out in our 31-point reform plan. The 6 fundamental reform commissions, which combined together to form the consensus commission, were actually proposed in our 31-point. We all want to build a country where we'll thrive with a rules-based society, where there will be checks and balances, the judiciary will be truly independent, and we will be working together to restore human rights, to protect the rule of law, to ensure freedom of expression for all, and to give free press. If we see the policies of Tareq Rahman, our acting chairman, over the last 1 year, he has repeatedly called for a country which will thrive with tolerance and cohesion. We rise or fall as one nation where the interest of the country will be the first priority. We want to build pro-democracy policies. And that's why he said employment of our youth should be the main priority. He has repeatedly emphasized on a technical and vocational education system where we will be upskilling and capacity enhancement for our youth. He has announced of introduction of multiple language, the globally valued languages, which will convert our youth to the global citizens. The employment-oriented education and training system will make sure that our youth are prepared for their empowerment, for their employment, and for their entrepreneurship. The family card that we have discussed is part of women's empowerment process where every individual, whether it's housewife or a professional, the lady, the mother of the family, will receive state-sponsored, the state benefit, 5 main products in their household. The state will deliver it to them every month. And that benefit will come in the form of rice, lentil, sugar, salt, and 5 main ingredients. We have discussed about farmer's card for all farmers, where we will categorize them based on small, medium, and big, and give them targeted incentives and loan facilities. So every farmer in the country will come to a database, and the state will provide them targeted policies for their empowerment and economic opportunities. We have policies for cottage, micro, small and medium enterprises. How are we going to give them collateral-free loans? How are we going to give them the ecosystem where we provide them the logistical support? The product, the people, we need to bridge them We need to ensure the market process is streamlined. We give them more training and the market access they need to have, not domestically, but also for international market with the infrastructural support and IT system. We have a policy to enhance the foreign direct investment in the country. So we have to reduce the number of touch points, get rid of the red tape as much as possible through good governance, and the dividend repatriation must be much more easier. We have policies to modernize the bankruptcy laws, policies for merger, acquisition, liquidation, new policies to modernize and upgrade the intellectual property rights, and asset protection for physical and virtual assets. The banking system that has been dismantled over 15 years must be fixed with aggressive policies. We need to upgrade the debt recovery system and reform the audit and tax policies that can serve the true interest of our people. Our vision is to lead the country through export-oriented growth. We have to diversify the product in garment industry. We have to explore the new markets. And our vision is to have an additional sphere of new zoning in various industries that includes agro-processing, light engineering, footwear, ICT. And for that, we have to streamline our economic zones and industry clusters with targeted benefits, policies, and taxes. We have a plan to have product-wise zoning and develop the ecosystem across districts and divisions where we value the inherent strengths of products that they have long been producing. Towards that direction, we will be streamlining the raw materials, workforce, infrastructure, and logistics in the grassroots level. The Bangladesh that we want to foresee is the one where we will be thriving with deregulation, economic liberalization, and public-private partnership. The spirit of this new Bangladesh will be one where we'll be ensuring the empowerment of the people from every background. And towards the journey, we believe a free, fair, and credible elections, which will lead to an accountable and transparent government with a public mandate, will truly ensure good governance, rule of law, human rights, and inclusive development for all. And towards that endeavor, we need your support. We need a Bangladesh that globally integrated, that works closely with our development partners, and that values a rules-based society for our democratic aspirations. Thank you very much. Thank you again for your presence.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Mr. Tabith Awal, who would be moderating this roundtable discussion today. So, Mr. Tabith Awal, if you could take the floor, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here today and this morning. We are well on our way in this discussions, but I would just remind everybody that this is actually a roundtable, and we would like to make it as interactive as possible. So at the duration of any moment, if you have any questions, please let me know, and we can entertain and answer questions in real time. And we strongly encourage you and welcome you to make comments or suggestions, if any, and that too during the time whenever you feel comfortable or you're willing to make a comment, or if you seek clarification, I will call upon you or get you the mic as soon as possible. At this point, we would like to start with our first guest speaker of the morning. He's a renowned economist and a professor, Mr. Rashid Titumir, professor of Dhaka University. Right after his speech, sir has another engagement for the PhD students, so he will be leaving us. But before that, I will seek a few minutes of his time in case you have any questions or comments in regards to his presentation and speeches. Mr. Titumir, please start. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. A very good morning. It's indeed a pleasure to speak before you on a topic that really is very important for the current departure of Bangladesh economy. And we need to start from a background. Where are we now? We were told many narratives. now we are witnessing how those narratives have become mirage. And we have seen in recent days the aftermath of the fallen regime that 1 in 4 people are living below the poverty line. Extreme poverty has nearly doubled. Unemployment rate are historic high. So now we have youth unemployment rate, which is 11.46% if we are to believe the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics. Graduate unemployment is unbearable. And if we are to take about underemployment, this is massive. And women labor force participation has hit rock bottom. So what we see, and if we are to really look at the engine of the growth, which is private sector credit growth dipping below 7%, reaching a 20-year low. So these are not mere statistics. These are stories that gives you the whole picture where the economy has been put by the previous deposed regime. So when we hear those statistics, it gives us a sense of despair. Do we have hope in Bangladesh? Can we really believe that Bangladesh can turn around and Bangladesh can march forward? That should be the key question, rather than really looking at the figures that I just shared with you. So what is the Bangladesh story? Does it tell a story that we can reverse it? And that's the story that we must try to understand. And meanwhile, we have seen certain changes which were held taboo until very recently has become now the hallmark of the policies. We have seen that protectionism is no longer taboo. Rather, we have seen unilateral imposition of duties. But simultaneously, there is a huge challenge before the economy of Bangladesh, which is about graduation. So against that backdrop, one has to really understand how Bangladesh can navigate. So given the evolving transitional fluidity in terms of geo-economic order, as well as where we are in terms of our poverty, vulnerability, inequality, and huge mass unemployment. So if we really look at the history tells us a different story. And history gives us hope. The hope is that if you really look at all those people's uprising has given us rather hope. So if one looks at 1978 to 81, our growth rate becomes 2 to 3%. Then after the military dictatorship between 1991 and 2006, what we see that there has been a 2 percentage point increase during 1991 to 1996. Then if we are looking at 2001 and 6, it reaches almost 7 percentage point, but if you average, it is 6 percentage. So what it tells that there could be 2 percentage point increase in GDP growth. And that's a story of resilience of Bangladesh. So if with proper policies, we can really march towards 8% growth rate. And that's not a daydreaming. That's a feasibility and that's a possibility. So what it means that if we are on a right course, then we can have a 8% growth rate. So that's the story of resilience. So what we can say for sure, if there are democratization process ongoing, then it equally matches and correlates with the democratic aspiration and our growth rate. I'm not saying that GDP growth rate is the indicator. It is an imperfect, but it's a second best indicator. So this is the story that I'm sure our friends will really carry forward home. That with democratization, our growth rates increases. And all positive indicators also increases. If you really look at 1991 and 2006, then you see poverty, the rate at which poverty has declined. But if you are pointing it with 2009 to until recently, you would see two things. One, there is a deceleration, which means that the poverty reduction rate has slowed down. Then there is a increased unemployment. And then if you are looking at other indicators in terms of, say, for example, the per capita expenditure in terms of private expenditure in terms of health, if you are looking at, say, reading or numerical literacy, all have gone down when there is no democracy. And that's empirically evident. So that leads to us to a conclusion, which is that if there are democracy or democratic practices are taking foothold, then Bangladesh reverses back and Bangladesh really demonstrate a success story. And the opposite is deinstitutionalization, deindustrialization, and increased unemployment. So even if you really look at another factor, because why everybody is talking about jobs, because job is really important. So what we have observed during 2008 until recently, a jobless growth trajectory, where there are questions about the credibility of the statistics. But even then, the story that I told you, that 2% increase has not happened over 2008 to 2023, 24. So that is a key milestone. And one has to really understand that milestone in order to navigate for a paradigm shift. Because we need to have a paradigm shift. Why we need to have a paradigm shift? Because our first generation, which is what we have seen now, an industrialization driven by RMG export with assistance in terms of everything but arms initiative or certain GSP facilities. So as the government suggests, there are obviously some circles are pointing to the fact that it might require deferment, but we are yet to hear from the government. If we are to have LDC graduation in November 2026, so that gives us another challenge. So what we need is a second generation reform program. And that, I am sure, as you are hearing, there are a lot of discussion, and we are quite happy as a citizen that political parties are talking about this transformation. And this is a serious takeaway that we are now engaging in terms of second generation reforms that could lead us to march forward. And as it happens, if there is if history is an indicator, Bangladesh would reach a $1 trillion economy by 2034. Now we are the 34th economy in the world. We are 8th largest country in terms of population, And it's not a distant dream that Bangladesh could achieve G20 status in 2038. And these are not really based upon hearsay or wish. These have been done through rigorous empirical evidence, and history is the real evidence. So if we would look at it, then we as pointed out earlier, so what we are looking at is a people's recovery. Because why? Because the story tells us if there are democratization, there are improvements in the indicators. So Bangladesh story is obviously about people and obviously about democratization. So if we can have that kind of people's recovery, which means that we need a second generation transformation which is based upon democratization of the economy. Without democratization of the economy, you can't ensure an economy for all. Because as all indicators would suggest, including the not perfect Gini coefficient, that inequality has increased. And particularly in urban areas, it has really transcended beyond 0.5, which is really alarming. So what we really aspire is a reconstruction, not a tinkering. What we need is a democratic economic governance. So which means that addressing the oligarchy is a very important issue, which requires infusing competition, which requires antitrust laws, which requires competition, liberalization, and deregulation. So this opening up is about democratizing economic governance. That is the first pillar in terms of the aspiration of the people, and you have seen July uprising. That leads us to one point, which is democratized economic governance, which means that we have an institution that serves all, not a few. So that requires reforms in financial sector, as well as there is a new requirement of enhanced capital market, so that we are no longer dependent on short-term, on long-term borrowing from short-term deposit from the banking sector. We need to restore central bank independence and devolve a certain amount to the local government tiers, so that it becomes the center of activities. Secondly, we need to move towards progressive fiscal mobilization. We know what we are right now. And only jobs program, if 10 million jobs are created in 18 months, which is a huge feasibility. Because if we are to look at if we can really unleash the potential, that could happen. And which means that our tax base increases. So it could really eventually lead us to enhance our tax net, reduce tax avoidance, and a strict discipline on tax exemptions. You have seen the way the oligarchs were given patronization. No one is saying that our industry and business doesn't require incentive. But what we have witnessed is not that of a performance-based incentive structure. So we need to move from patronage-based system to a performance-based incentive. then obviously, as we all are, and particularly our youth generation, we are concerned about just transition. And that requires structure and reduction in fossil fuel subsidies. And that could also really help healthcare and climate resilience. So what we see that there are possibilities, and with real kind of reforms in fiscal administration, this is a possibility. Because if you are to allow the institutions to function, then we can have it. The third point, which is very important for employment creation, which is industrialization policy for 99%. Because what we are witnessing right now is a first generation, which someone might call a preference clip, because this has been supported by preferences, GSP facilities, and others. So we need to really move and attract industrial policy. And here, the policy of multilateral alignment is crucial. So we want to see that multilateralism is in action, and we want to see that our Bay of Bengal as a strategic hub could attract foreign direct investment from growing Asia, East Asia, Gulf countries, and obviously our traditional partners from America and Europe. And we would really like to see that there are SAARC revival, including the building of regional energy grids, and we would also like to see that South Asians are coming and investing in our economic zones, despite all disinformation and misinformation. Because Bangladesh, as the country which has led to the establishment of SAARC, as well as we are equally interested to forge our relationship with ASEAN brothers and sisters, simultaneously maintaining our historical linkage with the West and Central Asia and West Asia. I would finish by 2 points. As you are aware, and most of you as good friends would really like to see a serious redesign of our national social security system. Because it's not serving. If you are looking at in terms of inclusion error and exclusion error. So definitely we have to move from this targeted social protection strategy to that of a universal life cycle based social protection, which you heard some of the ideas just now. So, and then finally and most importantly, we cannot move forward without really having skills and innovations which could match the 21st century. That requires huge transformation in our education and health system. So what we are looking at, a paradigm shift that could unleash and takes us from graduation to a $1 trillion economy with job created, with people engaged in economic activities, and they own the economy. So this is where we are, and hopefully we would see that practice is going to take a better shape in February, first or second week of February, so that we move forward where people are investing in us with sincerity, and we are moving towards an economy of $1 trillion economy, and that's a feasibility, and I don't see anything but that would happen in 2035. With that note, I thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you to Professor Titumir of Dhaka University. Just to make a quick summary, it was very important to discuss that the labor declining trend in Bangladesh, especially in the women's side. The economic protectionism are no longer taboos, are actually becoming economic tools, and Bangladesh must prepare for that. The lack of democracy has shown a lot of the indicators, especially economic and social, to be declining. And only an elected future government can help with the reconstruction of the country rather than tinkering with the economy of the country. Having said that, the floor is open for anyone who would like to ask a question or make a comment at this point of the time. Okay, it's a very easy audience today, I can see. Okay, I'm going to ask then one of our...
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to ask questions. I'm Abu Said Bilal, EU Trade Counselor in Bangladesh. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for organizing the event and also for giving us the information that you put on the table, especially the Investment Protection Act 1980, an act which is almost 45 years old. So let me be very brief. Do you have, I think, let me ask this question differently. The future government needs to look into this law because it's only 2-3 pages long document and very generic. Since then, in last half a century, this time span, many things have changed globally. This law needs to change dispute resolution. This law needs to talk about investment facilitation, which is missing. And it has a lot of problem in terms of clarity. I'm dealing with European investment in Bangladesh, and I deal with companies on the ground. If you ask me why investment not coming, and I can give you a list of issues, if the future government address them, then we can see more flow. First of all, the first and foremost, the problem is lack of clarity in Bangladeshi regulatory system. But when you have a lack of clarity in a law, that becomes subject to different interpretation by different authorities. Now, if I can interpret this in my own interest, like for example, if you go to one ministry, they interpret the law in one way, and you have under one ministry several departments, several agencies, and they interpret the law. I'm happy to see you that you are a lawyer, so you know very well what I mean here. So addressing the clarity issue is really important. There is this issue of balancing the investor rights versus giving the space to the local private sector, which is very important. And you say that protectionism is no longer a taboo. That's, of course, a long discussion. But when a state wants to save the interest of local investor versus it wants to draw foreign investment, I think there is a need to strike a balance here. If I say that I open everything for you, you come here, I will do everything for you, and then once the investor come and then we treat them differently, that gives a very wrong message. If I say, okay, my friend, you come and then I can give you this and I cannot give you that. I protect this sector and I open the other sector or another sector, which is fine. I will decide if I come or not. But once I come, you need to make sure that you keep your commitment. And this is what's happening in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is excellent in terms of giving tax breaks, tax holidays, a lot of tax benefits. But when a company spends 1 year here, Most of our colleagues give this example. For example, there is a marriage between two persons, and everything looks lovely. A lot of flowers, gifts, and they do a honeymoon. When they come back from there, they suddenly discover that there is a problem already. So an investor come here, and then they are well received initially, and then a lot of good words, rhetorics, but eventually, when it comes to paying taxes, they suddenly discover that, oh my gosh, I thought this tax amount is this amount, but then I finally find out that the actual effective tax rate is even much, much higher. If they knew this initially, they may not have, or they would not have invested in Bangladesh anyway. So this issue needs to be addressed. I think future government needs to do thorough investigation of the regulatory system, Investment Act, including the 80 Investment Act, and see where the problems are lying, why the clarity is becoming an issue here, why foreign investment is not coming. And in that case, I would say that we will welcome the future government to work with foreign missions here. We are very much in touch with our interlocutors in Bangladesh, and we will be happy to share our expertise and give feedback in respective sectors. Thank you very much. I took a lot of time.
No, thank you, Mr. Abu Said Bilal. Are there any questions or comments that anyone would like to discuss? And then we can address. Okay, at this point, Barrister Kaisar Kamal will say a few words.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you for asking this question. It is wonderful to hear from you. Basically, the law is subject to amendment, and our team is working on it. Once a parliament is in exist, of course, this law needed to be changed and amended. And we are preparing, and our team is consulting with the partners how to make one-stop service that you have mentioned clearly, the table-to-table, kind of a bureaucratic system in Bangladesh is not appropriate, not investment friendly. Therefore, our team is working how to introduce a one-stop service. At the same time, our team is working to amend the law and make it with the changing circumstances that we can beat the changing circumstances. That's all we are working on it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to further some more information and to give some more clarity on our future investment climate, which includes laws, implementation of the laws, and a conducive environment, I'm requesting Shafil Khosru to say a few words.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think you raised some very interesting questions. To answer regarding investors being, shying away from Bangladesh, one of the key aspects you already pointed out, there's lack of cohesion within departments. Then you have the bureaucratic red tapeism. So these are some of the factors that actually affect investment in Bangladesh, among others. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the investment position paper of our party, which is presented to you in front of you, if you go through it, we have talked about a streamlined regulatory framework, which is basically one-stop service and bringing all agencies under one roof. So I think that's proposed here, and this is what we're working on at this point in time. Basically, we're talking about making BIDA a legally binding agency, because what we see is a lot of investors, especially foreign investors, coming in, going through BIDA, and then going to various agencies to get permissions, which is running from table to table. So if you make BIDA a legally binding agency, then whatever BIDA says passes through in all other agencies as well. We're talking about assigning FDI captains, which is foreign direct investment captains, assigned by BIDA, which in the future will guide investors who are coming into Bangladesh through all the routes and the processes, one by one. So we're talking about these things. And just to add on to what Mr. Rashid Al-Mahmoud said, one of the key words, if you go through our document, is democratization of the economy. which we're talking about in general, because we need to transition from an oligarchic system that basically prevailed over the last 15 years, where democratic institutions were destroyed and were made extractive. So in this paper, we're talking about how we transition into a democratic economic landscape, where everybody will have equal opportunity to do business fairly, freely, and there will be no discrimination. And there will not be concentration of wealth within a certain group of people who basically control the wealth of the country. So this is one of the things we propose. If you go through our document, that's illustrated there in details, where the economy we talk about political democratization, but economic democratization is equally important. And that will only happen if there's political democratization. So they are correlated very strongly. So that's one of the things. And regarding investment climate, we're talking about a business-friendly ecosystem from day one, when an investor lands in Bangladesh airport, till the day he decides to, close his business. And we're talking about easy repatriation of funds, because that's one of the main concerns of foreign investors, and also easing regulations so business people can, thrive in Bangladesh in terms of business, and then also they're drawn away from the red tapeism and basically have a one-stop service. And we're talking about, as we said, a streamlined regulatory framework through BIDA, and we're talking about also FDI captains and a few other concepts. If you go through in detail, you'll find it in our document. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing out 1980 documents. That is what I was speaking about. That what is the history? Can we really think about how many foreign direct investment law prevailed during 1980? If you really look at, it was a very few countries. So what it moves, and you are rightly pointing out, that there are 12-point reform agenda, which speaks and it captures the best practices that can be adapted to the economic circumstances of Bangladesh. Because we might have certain practices that might not suit the conditions of Bangladesh. As you might understand that what is really important for a UAE investor, and UAE and others have many cases even in High Court with regard to investment. So what is really important, and what everyone has spoken, is that what we need is democratization. Because if there is a concentration, that ends up what we have witnessed. 22% in terms of ratio in private sector investment in terms of GDP. And that has remained stagnated, and in some years it has declined. So the evidence is very clear that our previous model was not driven by investment. And that's a major deficit of our growth story. And to that, there is only one way, which is investment. And if we cannot really remove all the bottlenecks, then our economy would not be driven by investment. And without investment, you cannot expect decent jobs. And without decent jobs, you cannot expect a decent living. And that decent job can increase our savings. And that could lead us to increase investment, a vibrant capital market. So what we have witnessed, and I will finish by that, a vicious cycle. Now we need to move from that vicious cycle to a virtuous cycle. And that is feasible. So the only point that I am hammering as a professor of economics is that there are evidence, and we can, provided we democratize the economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation thus far. And as I've said, continuously we will provide more clarifications and responses as and when the need arises. At this point, we would like to invite another guest speaker, someone who is a close, I'm sure, friend of everyone's in this room and a very renowned person, Mr. Masroor Riaz, who's chairman and CEO of Bangladesh Policy Exchange. Along with this, he has many other accolades, which I'm sure will be visible throughout his speech. Mr. Masroor Riaz, please.
Thank you, Thabit. I have 10 minutes, 5 minutes? Okay, 10 minutes, thank you. That's how I'll set my stopwatch. Very dear friends sitting here from the different diplomatic missions, development partners, very distinguished speakers at the panel, BNP leaders, a very good morning and Assalamu alaikum. Indeed, a great pleasure and a privilege to be able to present here in front of you on this extremely important topic, which could not have been more important for the Bangladesh economy and the Bangladesh as a country and for the nation of Bangladesh. Hence, I thank BNP and this wonderful team of young BNP leaders for taking this very timely outreach and a very timely initiative. Professor Titumir already set the ball rolling by setting the scene in a very concrete and a very robust way. Just to add to his, I want to highlight maybe 3 or 4 perspectives. Democracy and economic growth. What underpins this virtuous relationship? Why it's important for Bangladesh? What's ahead for Bangladesh in terms of economic opportunities and challenges? And how can a political transition to an elected government help, or in other words, absolutely critical in this particular context? Now, democracy and economic prosperity. 1 year, 7 months ago, right here in this room, February 2024, 1 month, perhaps 6 weeks into the 24 January election, the US government, Asia Foundation, Atlantic Council together hosted an event to introduce the concept of freedom and economic prosperity that both Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C. as well as Heritage Foundation heavily work on. And that was one of the first time Atlantic Council brought out their Prosperity and Freedom Index and what it means for countries like Bangladesh. Very clearly it showed, in light of the entire world, the 6 regions, South Asia, East Asia, Pacific, Eastern Europe, North America, Latin America, prosperity and the freedom largely underpinned by democracy and democratic principle goes hand in hand. At that point, Bangladesh's ranking was not so great. It was perhaps 141st in the freedom ranking. It has now improved in 2025 to 122nd position. But prosperity remains in one of the low percentile boxes. Prosperity denoted in the form of economic freedom. If you look at 2 buckets, regulatory efficiency and open markets, extremely important for economic growth. Business freedom score is 56, average developing countries 60. Labor freedom 46, average developing countries around 60. Market freedom 70, developing countries slightly higher. In the open markets category, trade freedom, Bangladesh's score was 62. Investment freedom, strikingly low, 50. Financial freedom, even lower, 40. This is also Heritage Foundation's Economic Freedom Index. So that tells you from a global perspective that how importantly and intrinsically linked these 2 issues are, democracy as a foundation of economic growth. If you look at last year's Nobel Prize in the category of economics, Acemoglu and his colleague got that, clearly shows a study between 1964 and 2010, so that's 46 years of 184 countries observation, how closely, positively economic growth, democracy, political freedom, politically elected government are. For democratic government or countries which democratize their nations and economy, the economic growth, the GDP growth is on an average minimum 20% higher than their competitors who do not have that democratic freedom. Now, in Bangladesh, why this is important? I say for three reasons, 3 C's. Confidence, connections, change. And I'll come to each of them. This comes at a time when Bangladesh faces a 3x3 dimension of global and domestic risks and opportunities, whichever way it can interpret and leverage these from a global and domestic economic perspective. In the global economy, we have 3 issues on our horizon. Whether they remain a risk or an opportunity, it would depend on Bangladesh nations, the governments, and the private sector's efforts, how they prepare for that from a policy perspective as well as from market perspective. The first, global shifts, evolving global political order, which is leading to protectionism and global trade war. We tend to focus excessively, disproportionately on Trump tariff, but that's just one symptom out of this overall global shifting order. The second, Professor Titumir alluded to that, the changes in the international support measure, preferential support measures that Bangladesh has been enjoying for decades, which will end following the graduation out of the LDC list. That creates a number of risks for Bangladesh's key growth driver, the export-led growth story, as Bangladesh's close to 60% of its export are now GSP or preferential market, preferential access enabled. Now, third, as we'll hear from the BJME President, Babu Bhai, what got us here in the last 3 decades to the second largest RMG sector in the world, RMG exporter, will not get us to $100 billion RMG, or for that matter, even for sustaining our excellent RMG competitiveness. The global space is changing in terms of ready-made garments, particularly in terms of compliance requirements. European Union came up with green, Bilal Bhai, you spoke about it, EU Green Deal, EU Action Plan for Circular Economy, EU HRED, the human rights due diligence. Countries like Germany coming up with German Supply Chain Act, many other countries following. H&M coming up, the largest importer from Bangladesh, coming up with their own sustainability requirements, whether it's resource efficiency, recycled materials, energy efficiency, carbon adjustments, and so on. Bangladesh has to get better, and Bangladesh is nowhere ready at this stage. So that creates an existential crisis or question for Bangladesh's export sector, including for the ready-made garment sector. So 3 big spots on the horizon from the global economy. The 3 big spots from the local economy in Bangladesh, what we have is investments. Private investment has been stuck around 23% of GDP for several years now. Both Israfil and Bilal Bhai, and also Professor Titumir mentioned about FDI. It's appalling. We talk about numbers, 3 billion, 2 billion, but if you look at the average of GDP, last 5 years, Bangladesh is 0.8%, Vietnam is average 5 years above 3%, India is above 1.5%. So investment, without which neither our jobs, nor prosperity, nor infrastructure, as well as economic diversification, that is another must for our export growth or economic sustainability, is not going to come. The second issue is employment. Professor Titumir mentioned youth employment. I feel very sad when I see Bangladesh tops the list in South Asia in terms of educated youth unemployment. If you look at some of the recent employment figures that came out, Tabith, I'm going to take maybe 3 more minutes, if you allow me. My 10 minutes ends in another minute. PPRC, Dr. Hussein Zillur Rahman presented last week. It is if you look at the unemployment rate, poverty rate, it has gone up from 2022 in 18% to 27.9% in 2025. If you look at employment, national is 52%, not great, but if you look at the female employment, 25% late female participation rate. That's very sad given we have more than 50% of our population as from the female category. And when it comes to the real picture about unemployment, it's far worse than that 48%, 52, 100 minus 52, because there is unemployment disguised under what do we call underemployment, people who do not work, who do not get to work 40 hours a week. And the number of that is 38%. So it is a big time bomb that's sticking under the carpet. And if we do not address that, if we do not get to the policies, the bold moves, which can only be possible by an elected political government, this time bomb is going to explode. And we saw glimpses of that last year, which was partly about job, but a lot more about democratic rights. The third issue is diversification. Bangladesh economy face a huge risk, concentration risk. Ready-made garments, it's a pride of ours, second largest in the world. 2012, we had 73% of our exports from ready-made garments. Fast forward 13 years, 2025, we have 84%. That's heavily risky. We have dodged the bullet back in late 19s when Harkins bill came about child labor. We dodged the bullet when financial crisis started in 2009. We dodged the bullet during COVID and again during Trump tariff. But bullet will not always keep us. At some point it will hit us if we have that level of concentration. So the 3x3 risk, but we can turn it into confidence, opportunity if we look at these 3 things. Confidence, connect, and change. And that's where I think democracy, elected government, election, political government comes in. Confidence at the moment is extremely low. If you Google, if you look at some of the newspapers, some of the even both local private sector and bona fide local private sector and foreign investors say no big investment until a political government is back. I'll just give you an example. Last week, Bonik Barta was supposed to be here, Hanif Bhai. You saw the front page. We have Minami-san and Kohei-san from the Japanese embassy. We have a beautiful infrastructure at the airport, 3rd terminal, but it's sitting idle because we need a global operator. And thankfully, great Japanese consortium came up to discuss for operations and management. But there is, according to that Bonik Barta news, there is now every shakiness, every hesitation on the part of the consortium to sign the contract until an election is done. Similarly, those of you who are following the port story, Chittagong Port, Bay Terminal, Lal Dia, that is going to be again existential for our export competitiveness and domestic economy until we develop the Bay Terminal. Singaporeans, UAE, DP World, they're all expected to bring in their investment, global expertise, global network. However, as we hear, as we engage with them, they do not have the confidence until an election comes. We have Alberto from our good friend from Swiss Embassy, one of the largest conglomerates around the world, who's present in Bangladesh for a couple of decades, have got their investment committee approval from Geneva for a 25 million euro investment into a very important food category. It's on hold until clarity on policy, consistency comes up. So, confidence. Second, connect. One thing I must say, despite a lot of good things this interim government did, particularly initial efforts of restoration of government, governance, as well as to some extent, expression of intent for reforms, one thing this government has not been able to do well is to connect well with the investor community and business community. And again, we can hear from the BGMEA president, if you talk to the bona fide businesses here and foreign, local association, I think one common concern they have that there has been a lack of engagement or very weak engagement at best from the interim government to engage the investors and business community to understand their concern. And that is where a political government is extremely important. And the same goes for people, the citizens, whether it's for social protection, education, health, and so on. I think what is going to be important is to have a government in place as soon as possible who have the connectivity through their political infrastructure nationwide with the root level of people. And finally, change, which is reform. Again, I give a lot of credit to this interim government for the effort to restore governance, like in banking, like in energy. I give them a lot of credit for giving back independence to the central bank, based on which the central bank has restored macro stability, at least in the foreign exchange and balance of payment. However, one thing this government has not been able to do so well, as we all expected, is reform, particularly economic reforms. Very few trade and investment reforms. There is no economic reform program, and these reforms are going to be difficult without an elected political government with the mandate of the people. So let me stop here. I thank the BNP leadership for organizing this, and particularly I want to acknowledge it is really heartening to see this initiative and outreach coming from a party whose founder, President Ziaur Rahman, helped Bangladesh transition and embrace the private sector economy in the country, coming away from a socialist economy, and also whose respectable chairperson in the early 90s initiated the trade, tax, and financial sector liberalization. So we hope this will continue now, during the election, and beyond the election, because Bangladesh truly stands at a crossroad. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you very much to Mr. Masroor Riaz for very, very clear-cut and easy-to-understand issues that are going to take us to the next level of our economy. Some takeaways, very important to always remember: confidence, connection, and change, the 3 C's that he's mentioned. Something to take away that Bangladesh's next level has to be based on exports and employment generation. These are the challenges we have to overcome. Economic diversification was another thing that was mentioned very clearly, and we're all a believer of that. And for a long time, we've been mentioning the same thing. Preferential supports for Bangladesh has gotten us this far, but we all understand preferential supports will no longer exist over time. So Bangladesh also has to learn to stand on its own feet and be equally competitive in the global economy if we were to go there. So thank you again for your exceptionally clear words. I once again open the floor for anyone to ask questions or make a comment or constructive criticism. We'll go with that. Can I request Barrister Mir Halal to say a few more words on this issue?
Good morning to distinguished speakers and our distinguished guests. I just want to shortly add a few points that needs to be addressed when it comes to economic growth and investments and so on. See, at this point of time, we have nationally, after the 5th August, the whole nation has sort of decided on an interim government. So, but the issue remains for any of these interim agreements that's happening between the government and the development partners or these investors, be it local or be it global, all this needs to be ratified by a formal government, which is the parliamentary form of government. So what happened was in 2007, when we had this sort, not this type, but interim government, 46 agreements, such agreements were made, out of which 43 has been scrapped in the first session of the parliament. So this point is a bit deterrent for investors, because they want to know whether this agreement would be continued by the next government, because all these activities needs to be ratified by a formal government, which at present, according to our constitution, is the parliamentary form of government. So that's one issue. Another issue is stability, because there are lots of lawyers in the room. I've met some from the